So we've talked a lot about when The Chosen Season 5 is coming out because, well, it's been pushed back and delayed, obviously, on purpose for a couple of different reasons. Number one is because they want it to be closer to Easter for the future releases of The Chosen, so they're kind of resetting when this is going to take place. Also, they want to dub the show into more languages so that when it comes out, a lot more people can see it. This is really interesting, and I think it brings us to a couple of different things that we can talk about tonight, because there's been one major thing that's been misconstrued or misunderstood by the majority of The Chosen fans, and that is what is going to be happening internationally with the show. And this is something that I've had questions about as well. I even asked and reached out to the Chosen team, the press email that they have, and I never heard back from them. So I had to reach out to Dallas myself, and I got an answer from him to kind of clarify what is actually going on here. So here's an article that we read before that gives us the release dates for The Chosen. So let's go over that one more time. First of all, season 5 is coming out right here in the beginning of April, but it starts actually at the end of March. So March 27th right here. So the first part is what they're calling it of The Chosen, The Last Supper, which is season 5. This is going to be on March 27th, and the first episodes are episodes 1 and 2. Now, Dallas did give us some extra information during the live stream recently, just a couple of days ago, and what he said is that none of these parts are going to be over 3 hours. So they're going to be a normal movie length this time, whereas last time we had to sit in the theaters for almost 4 hours for some of these parts that came out. So these episodes are going to be a little bit tighter. They're going to be a little bit shorter, which is a good and bad thing, right? It means that it's easier to watch them in theaters, but it also means that you get less content overall, or at least less time in that content. So yeah, it's kind of hard to say overall. But part 2 is going to come out early April. We don't have the exact date yet. And that is going to be, part 2 is going to be 3, 4, and 5, episodes 3, 4, and 5. Then we get part 3 after that, which is probably going to be mid to late April. And that is going to be episodes 6, 7, and 8. I would assume that there's going to be about 2 weeks in between each of these things. So we should see this in early to mid-April, and then the third part in mid to late April. Now, this is specifically talking about the release that's happening in US and Canada, okay? This is where the majority of the Chosen audience is going to be watching, at least in English, right? But the reason why they postponed the project overall is because they want to dub it in other languages and have it released all at the same time, right? So let's talk about this next part, because I think this is going to be a little bit irritating to some of my international audience. So let's talk about this. So here we have, what is this ad I'm seeing? So strange. Okay. Right here we have April 10th. So somewhere in the middle of part 2 and 3 probably, or right before part 2 airs in the US. They're going to have to wait like 2 weeks essentially for their first part to come in, the international audience. So April 10th, The Chosen Last Supper Part 1 will also be available in theaters in over 40 global territories, including Brazil, Mexico, United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, Poland, Philippines, India, and more. And then here it says, I'm possibly more excited to bring season 5 to the world than any other season we've done, Jenkins wrote in a press release. Unfortunately, it's not coming until March, but that's because it's a huge season and requires a ton of work. But I'm so thrilled to show a glimpse of it, blah, 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 right? When it will be released on streaming, we don't know. So what did we miss here? What is this section saying here? It's saying that part one right here, The Chosen Last Supper Part 1, will be available in over 40 territories in April 10th, okay? This is something that I had a question about because I was really confused. I was like, okay, so we see April 10th, we're going to have The Chosen Part 1 in theaters for the international audiences, but when do the other ones come out? And I was really confused. Like, does this mean that we're going to get them at some point in the future in the international audience, or does this mean that they are not going to receive them like we saw in season 3? Because if you remember, for the season 3 theatrical release, they only got part 1 for most areas. There were some areas that would show like episodes 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, 3, and 4, or they would show like only part one of what we saw in the States, so the first theatrical release, or they would get like the first and second theatrical release, but not the third, or sometimes they'd get all three, or sometimes they only got one. It was really random depending on where you were. Like, so if you're in Norway versus Ireland versus Brazil, you got different kind of experiences of when these things released, right? In the theaters, at least. So I got some clarification because I actually reached out to the Chosen team, the press email, and I asked them like, hey, I need some clarification on this because a lot of the articles and stuff aren't really clear about what is happening with the international audience. Is the international audience going to receive all of these parts in theaters, or are they just receiving part one? I never heard back from them for about a week. I never heard back from them. So I reached out to Dallas myself, and I just wanted some clarification. So he clarified for us. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this content and you want to see us making more stuff just like this, then the best way to support us is through snipesupport.com. You can pledge $5, $10, or $25 a month in order to help us to continue making content just like this, regardless of how YouTube treats us or how many people they send it out to. It really, really helps. And on top of that, you actually get to see a lot of our content early, or even extra content that is never going to be on YouTube. There's a lot of stuff over there that is just for our Patreon people, including full live streams that are more than just what you're seeing here on YouTube. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to have you over there. And of course, yeah, let's continue on with the video. That yes, it looks like for the most part, and again, they're not promising this for every situation, but for the most part, most of the international stuff is only going to get part one. So that means that only part one is going to come out for you guys, and then you're going to have to wait for the app to release. That's pretty rough, and I get that. It's the same thing that happened for season 4, in fact, last year, earlier this year, I guess. And so we're going to be going through that again. And this is sort of what I've talked about in the past. This is one of the reasons why I am not personally a massive fan of the theatrical releases, is because of the split that it brings to the audience, because it's now going to create another split, not only from the people who can go to the theaters and the people who can't, but the people who are even brought into the possibility of going to the theaters versus those who aren't even receiving it in their countries, right? And so the UK, for example, you might have only part one, and then you won't get the rest of it until the very, very end, whenever it comes out on the app, right? Which is most likely going to be in early summertime, right? So it's like, man, it kind of stinks. But like, I also understand it too, because the US and Canada have a very different relationship with theaters and with movies than I think even the UK or a lot of these other European countries have, and especially, Brazil or the Philippines or India or whatever else. I think a lot of these other countries have different relationships with the movie theaters than we do here in the States or in Canada. And so while for me, like, it's cool if we go to the movies, that many times in a month, it's not really my favorite thing to do, but for the Chosen, I would do it, right? In these other countries, maybe it's not the same way. So here's what you can do, okay? So we can, one, complain about this, which I think is a valid response as well. It's kind of like, man, that sucks. What are we going to do about it? But we have to move forward. Secondarily, some of these theaters will choose to show more parts of The Chosen, the more money and the more backing that they get for these shows, okay? So what happened in season 4? Season 4, they released part 1 in theaters in a lot of these international locations, but then whenever they tried to release part 2, or they saw at the end of the run of part 1, nobody showed up to theaters in the international audiences, okay? So all of these theaters are empty, they're wasting space, they're wasting money in all of these international theaters. So the best way that you can help is to go and see part 1 in your local area. So if you are international and you really want to see The Chosen and you're really hyped for season 5 and you want to see all of it, make sure that those theaters are bought out, right? Make sure that all of your friends and family, everybody that you know that is into The Chosen, goes and sees these in theaters, because if they don't, then the theaters will never show parts 2 and parts 3. So it's a pretty big deal there. And you're going to want to see season 5, because we also got confirmation on a couple more things from Dallas, including that season 5 is going to end in the Garden of Gethsemane, which we've been talking about for a while here. While fans knew that Dallas and the team were saving the crucifixion for season 6, the question is when within the chain of biblical historical events would season 5 end? Well, according to Jenkins, the season 5 finale will conclude just before Jesus is arrested, with season 6 containing the full gamut of his arrest and what unfolds in those next 24 hours. So we know that season 6 is going to be 24 hours of Jesus being arrested and then crucified at the very end. But we know that season 5 now will probably end with the kiss from Judas, which is really, really intense. I think that's going to be so cool to see. So anyway, all of that wrapped up. The US and Canada audience are going to get all 8 episodes within the end of March and the end of April. All of that's going to be wrapped up in about a month. Then the rest of the world will get episodes 1 and 2, only 1 and 2, and those will be in theaters on April 10th. And I'm sure that will vary depending on where you are and what theaters are showing it and whatnot. But most likely you won't get parts 2 and 3 in the theaters internationally unless they see an extreme amount of support for it. So go out and support The Chosen, go buy tickets, fill up the theaters, and then in the future and even this season, you could see more and more theaters wanting to show The Chosen season 5, right? So it's really up to you guys how much response is brought to this. So yeah, anyway, I know it can be difficult. I know it can be annoying, but that is the situation as it is. So anyway, we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.